Political fallout from the Israel war is sowing division on both sides of the Atlantic. Here in the UK, Labour MP Imran Hussain has quit the shadow cabinet because his leader, Sir Keir Starmer, quite possibly our next Prime Minister, won't back a ceasefire. Democrats in the US are turning on President Biden over his support for Israel. Republicans, meanwhile, are divided on how far the US should go to back its ally and whether funding should be tied to its aid for Ukraine. To discuss all this, I'm joined by Republican Senator Rand Paul, author of the new book, Deception, the Great COVID Cover-up. Senator, great to speak to you again. It's been a while.
Great to see you, Piers, and I'm glad you're uncensored now. I guess we can say anything we want, right?
You can absolutely say whatever you want, and you will not be edited, Senator, so you fire away. I want to start. We've just been discussing on the show with Douglas Murray these protests, and in particular, a mass protest planned for London on Saturday, on Armistice Day, Veterans Day, of course, in America. And a huge debate has erupted about whether this march should be banned. It's now been decided by the Metropolitan Police it will go ahead. The organisers have said they won't go near the cenotaph. The Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, has said he's very against this march, but he also understands that free speech means that they're entitled to do it, even if we find it distasteful. What do you think of this?
You know, I think the answer to despicable speech or speech you disagree with is more speech. I think combating ugly things with better ideas and with useful arguments is much better than banning speech. Now, there are some parameters, though. I mean, you can't, in the United States, you can't say we're going to go shoot up a school or we're going to blow up a military base. There are things you can't say. But for the most part, if you're going to stand up and say, we think the Palestinians are deprived and in despair and we think it's Israelis' fault, one, that's not anti-Semitism. That's a political point of view. It's a point of view I disagree with, but I would never want to censor it because that's not the kind of country I want to live in. And I already have complaints in my own country about censoring speech with regard to the ideas that I put forward in my book.
Right. I'm going to come to that because you're right. I mean, I think a lot of censorship went on during the COVID pandemic. And I'm not entirely blameless myself, actually, in terms of the way I conducted that debate early on. Let me talk to you first about Israel and this war with Hamas. A lot of debate, again, about where the line is in terms of proportionality. Do you think there is a line in terms of Israel's response?
I'm afraid you froze up there. If we could repeat the question for me, please.
My apologies. I'll ask you again. Let me start by asking you about Israel and this war with Hamas. A lot of debate raging about what is a proportionate response by Israel. Many people saying on the Israeli side they don't think there should be any proportion to the response. They should do whatever it takes to get rid of Hamas. Where do you sit on this debate?
You know, I was horrified to see the kids at the concert killed. I have 3 boys that have all gone to music concerts in the U.S., and I can't imagine people showing up in Jeeps with automatic weapons and just mowing down innocent, unarmed people, going house to house, killing women, children, mothers, fathers. So just the horror of the senseless violence that came from Hamas. I think there's a difference also in that Hamas targeted civilians. Now, there is some question of the civilians who do die and will die in Gaza. What are the repercussions of that? I don't fault Israel for saying we've got to wipe out this menace, Hamas, and we can't live this way with them killing our civilians. I don't in any way condemn that. But there is a point at which the incidental or accidental killing of civilians in the incursion into Gaza will backfire. This has been the same thing that I've pointed out throughout the world. When we drone some goat herder in Africa, do we get rid of terrorism or do we make all of his family angry enough to become terrorists themselves? So there is that. I also think that someone has to be saying over and over again what would come with peace, what would come with the Palestinians choosing to absolve and to denounce violence and to recognize Israel. What kind of prosperity would come from that? I don't think we say that enough, because I think in saying that, there may well be some Palestinians somewhere that are listening in Gaza or the West Bank that say, I want to be that leader that brings peace to my community and prosperity to Gaza by renouncing violence. But I don't think we say enough what would come, the good things that would come by renouncing violence.
Yeah, I mean, Prime Minister Netanyahu has now come out and said that he sees Israel indefinitely occupying Gaza at the end of this war. But that seems to me to be probably the very worst thing he should be saying if he wants to bring Palestinians to a place of any hope at the end of this.
Yeah, Israel has to decide what they have to decide for their own security. But there is a downside to an occupation. There's a downside to remaining there, because the question is how much of the Palestinian people in Gaza are with Hamas and how much are not? Will a long-term occupation convince more people who are not yet aligned with Hamas to become aligned with Hamas? All these questions have to be sorted through, and none of this is to say they can't and shouldn't defend themselves, but there are actions and reactions. For every action, there's a reaction, and so you have to think these things through. And I think while that's going on, still someone needs to be dangling the carrot of, if they were to renounce violence in Gaza, think of all the Gulf sheikdoms around them, Saudi Arabia and all the very wealthy countries that could help them, but they've been prevented from helping them because the worry is that there'll be missiles and bombs and they shoot missiles into Israel. If that could stop and there could be a legitimate authority in Gaza, I think the possibility for prosperity way, unimaginably beyond where we are now, and to get rid of the despair and poverty would be something that maybe we can find reasonable people that will appeal to.